Democrats continue their hot streak, taking the mayor's office in Miami, Florida, that had long been held by Republicans and winning a Georgia state House district that President Trump carried by double digits last year. Here to break it all down, Sarakshi Rai, deputy managing editor here at The Hill. Hey, Sarakshi, so let's start in Georgia. Democrat Eric Gisler defeated Republican Mack Guest IV in a special election for Georgia's House District 121. Why is that seen as significant on a national scale?
That's right, Drew. What we saw was quite surprising, because this is a Georgia State House race, but it is also a district that the president won by over 12 points just last year. So in a way, this shows that the Dem voters, at least in the state of Georgia, are feeling energized going into the 2026 midterms. They are kind of looking ahead and coming out to vote for their Democratic candidate. And given that the president carried this district, it's just an indicator also that, perhaps the Democratic voters are feeling confident and are feeling like the messaging is starting to stick, at least for their party in the state of Georgia. Drew.
Georgia has become one of the swingiest of swing states. What do you think these results mean for next year's Senate race in Georgia? It's one of the most hotly contested. Jon Ossoff is the incumbent Democrat there. He's trying to defend his seat in a state that Trump won in 2024.
That's right. Georgia is an extremely critical race, and it is key to potentially the Democrats flipping the balance of power in the Senate. Now, we know that Jon Ossoff is, the senator from Georgia, but he is highly vulnerable just given that Georgia is a battleground state. It is a state that Trump carried massively in last year's election. And what we're seeing really now is that the Dems are campaigning on those key points of affordability. This is a message that has been resonating with Americans across the country. And we've also seen some huge wins for Democrats. If you look at New Jersey, if you look at Virginia, if you look at the Georgia State House race now, and if you look at Miami, so there is some indication that, while this is a battleground state, there might be some hope for Democrats in Georgia with their voters starting to get more energized.
All right, let's go to my home state of Florida and talk about Miami. Now, the race there for mayor is technically nonpartisan, but the mayor has been a Republican since 1997. Now, Democrat Eileen Higgins has flipped the office, defeating Republican Emilio Gonzalez, who was endorsed by President Trump. A lot of Hispanic voters in Miami. Republicans have made gains among Hispanics in recent elections, especially in South Florida. What do you make of these results?
That's right, Drew. We do have the first Democrat mayor in over 30 years in Miami, but this was not unexpected for political watchers. There was some sort of indication that perhaps this might be an outcome. Now, the race is nonpartisan, and Eileen Higgins has come out and said that she's going to be a mayor for all of Miami, not just one party. Ahead of the FIFA World Cup and that big game in Florida as well, what we're seeing is that this is also just an indication that, perhaps the city of Miami does, tend to lean more Democrat anyway. So the Republicans are doubling down, saying that it's not really an indication of anything. It's just, there are more Democrats within the city limits of Miami, and this was what they were expecting anyway, Drew.
Yeah, maybe the result was expected, but the margin seems to be pretty surprising. Higgins won by nearly 20 points, a little more than a year after President Trump essentially split the Miami vote with Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. We have seen some polling that shows President Trump's approval among Hispanics has slipped in the last year, and his immigration policy seems to be playing a major factor in that. Do you think that played a role here? I mean, Higgins was critical of the president's immigration enforcement tactics.
That's right, Drew. It's still unclear whether or not those immigration policies played a role in Miami. As I mentioned, Miami, the city limits is, very heavily leans Democrat. But, we know that President Trump overall carried Miami-Dade County, last year. So there is that juxtaposition as well. I mean, it is surprising that she won by such large margins. And it's a 30-year streak that has officially ended last night. And she will be the next Democrat mayor of Miami. But as of now, it's too soon to say whether or not, the Hispanics in the state are kind of moving away from Republicans and President Trump, because let's not forget, they came out in huge hordes to vote for the president in last year's election. And while his immigration policies have not gone down so well, they are very much on his side when it comes to some of his immigration policies. But polling does indicate that they are starting to maybe have some discrepancies there with the president.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't just that President Trump endorsed Gonzalez. Governor DeSantis, Senator Scott, Congressman Donalds, who's running for governor next year, all endorsed him as well. And the voters basically said no thanks. Could this be, I don't know, a shot in the arm for Democrats who have really been obliterated in recent elections there in Florida?
Well, you know, Florida, the Democrats in Florida do have a voter registration disadvantage, right? There are 1.4 million Democrats, less Democrats registered in that state. So potentially, you know, it's always seen as a red state in the most recent elections. So while it's unclear whether or not this is really that shot in the arm, as you say, for Florida Democrats, it does indicate that maybe there is room for them to maneuver if they double down on policy and their campaign and if their messaging resonates with voters. But so far what we've seen is Florida is very much Republican, and they do have a voter registration advantage in the state of Florida, which is, you know, quite hard to beat when you look at the recent elections there.
Yeah, be interesting to see if Florida ever regains its status as a swing state. We'll leave it at that. Sarakshi Rai, thanks so much.